Hey everybody. I want to do something I don't think I've ever done here before. I want to give us a little spiritual test, or give us an opportunity to do a little spiritual test, and maybe in kind of an unorthodox way here. I want to start with a clip from the movie Jaws. Most of us have probably seen the movie Jaws. It came out back in the late 70s, early 80s, I think. But I want you to watch this scene where Martin, one of the main guys in the movie, sees the shark for the first time. Now they had been, they've been hunting for it, and this is the scene where he sees the shark the first time. And I want you to watch really carefully his reaction to it, because this sets me up for right what I want to do and where I want to go. So watch this, and I apologize, I won't have to do this, poor man style, but so watch real carefully his reaction and what he says at the end. I love that. You're gonna need a bigger boat. Your boat ain't big enough, man. So he realized that his boat was not nearly big enough. And so here's my question, and the test that I want us to think about here just for a few minutes is your understanding and your view of what it means to fear God, is it big enough? Is your understanding and your view of what it means to fear God, is it big enough? And so what I want to do here is I want to take an Old Testament scripture and an New Testament scripture that kind of give us pictures into the same biblical story. So the story is, and this is very fitting because tomorrow is Good Friday and we're coming into Easter weekend. The story is God has delivered the children of Israel out of Egypt. They've crossed the Red Sea. They're on their way to Mount Zion. And God's going to reveal himself in a very profound and just an awesome way that he's going to reveal himself to them. And of all the times I've heard about the Ten Commandments, I don't know that I've ever heard the context. And I hope to paint that picture a little bit for you so you get an idea of what these people saw. They were terrified, and we're going to read it. So there's two passages. The first one is in Exodus 20. If you want to grab, you can grab a Bible if you want. If you want to just listen, you can. But I do encourage you to even, take some time and dig into this a little more, because there's a ton in Scripture about the fear of God, and it's very important. So here's verse 18, Exodus 20:18 says, "When the people heard the thunder and the loud blast of the ram's horn, and when they saw the flashes of lightning and the smoke billowing from the mountain, they stood at a distance, trembling in fear." So they were terrified at the scene of what they were seeing, this lightning and all that. Then verse 19 says, "And they said to Moses, 'You speak to us and we will listen, but don't let God speak directly to us or we will die.'" Don't let God speak directly to us or we will die. And it makes you wonder what they heard. What they heard. But verse 20 is very important, okay? Verse 20 says, Moses says to them, "Don't be afraid." So here they are terrified. Moses says, "Don't be afraid." But this is key, and this is my test right here. "For God has come in this way to test you and to see that your fear of him will keep you from sinning." For God has come in this way to test you and so that the fear of him, your fear of him, will keep you from sinning. So now turn to, or you don't have to turn, if you want to you can, but to Hebrews 12. And I'm going to read two chunks of scripture, 18 through 21, and then I'm going to read the last few verses. So here's 18. So this is another glimpse into the same story that I just read. Verse 18 says, "You have not come to a physical mountain, to a place of flaming fire, darkness, gloom, and whirlwind, as the Israelites did at Mount Sinai. For they heard an awesome trumpet blast," same thing it says in Exodus, "and a voice so terrible they begged God to stop speaking. They staggered back under God's command. Even if an animal touched the mountain, it must be stoned to death." And then verse 21, and I want to pause here just for a minute, because a lot of times we read scripture and, you know, it just, it goes, we don't think about what we're reading. When you read scripture, you should think about what you're reading. Verse 21 says, "Moses himself was so frightened at the sight that he said, 'I'm terrified and trembling.'" So this scene, this manifestation of God on Mount Sinai, in giving them the law and in revealing himself to them, Moses was terrified. But I love this. But he still went up the mountain because he was invited to come up the mountain. And so again, I just want to ask you the question is, do you have a deep and reverent awe of God? Do you have a deep and reverent awe of God? I want to read you one more scripture in Job, which I just found this morning. I thought was so cool, which kind of connects this all together. Job 9:32 through 35. Job 9:32 through 35. And what I thought was cool about this is, so if you know anything about the book of Job, Job suffered, really at the hand of Satan. He was tested. And he's in the middle. he's in the middle of that agony of his test. And even as we, I just think of tomorrow. Tomorrow is Good Friday. And it was good for us, but it wasn't good for Jesus because of his suffering. But here's Job in the middle of his suffering. And this is what he says. There's a cool little insight in here. And when I read it, I think you'll see it. But I just want to point it out. Verse 32 says, "God," this is Job, "God is not a mortal like me, so I cannot argue with him or take him to trial. If only there were a mediator between us, someone who could bring us together. The mediator could make God stop beating me, and I would no longer live in terror of his punishment." Okay? Then verse 35 says, "Then I could speak to him without fear, but I cannot do this in my own strength." And I hope you see what I just read. Okay? 33 says, Job is crying out, if only there was a mediator, if only there was somebody who would go between and bring us together. And verse 34, the mediator could stop God from beating me, which Job thought this was punishment for his sin, and it really wasn't. But then he says this very important thing, "And I would no longer live in terror of his punishment." Excuse me. The fear of God is to turn us in the right direction. Okay, then that's what Job is saying. I would no longer live in terror of his punishment. Well, that's exactly what this mediator came to do, is to take our punishment. And so the proper fear of God is to turn us, really it turns us toward God. It turns us in the right direction and causes us to do the right thing and turns us away from the wrong thing. So I just ask you again, is your understanding and your view of the fear of God, is it big enough? Does it need to be bigger? Maybe it needs to expand a little bit. I mean, we all struggle with different things, and all of us struggle with sin. But a proper fear of God is going to turn you in the right direction and turn us away from what is wrong and turn us toward what is right. I want to just tell you a quick story, and then I'm done here. So yesterday I took a ride on my bike, and I went through Moravia and up Long Hill. And if you go up Long Hill, there's two cricks. They're really waterfalls, but they're cricks that come down off the hill, and they're really, really steep. And they kind of caught my attention as I was going up the hill. And so much so I stopped, I got off my bike, and went down and just enjoyed the creek. I mean, it was beautiful. I just sat there for a while. And I noticed in the one that there was a culvert that went under the road and over to the other side. So just out of curiosity, I went across the road because I wanted to see where the water came out, where the falls came out. So when I got over there and I went over the guardrail, I mean, it literally, you didn't go too far before it was like a straight down drop. Like, you know, I mean, it was a cliff basically. And so because I didn't want, it would have been foolish for me to try to get, to get over there, because it would be very easily a fall. I had a fear of, and not, I'm not afraid of heights, but I had a fear of the danger of falling. And that's how I look at the fear of God, is fear of God actually pushes you in the right direction. Just like he said to his people, Moses said, don't be afraid. God's not here to kill you. He's here to put his fear in you, to keep you from sinning, to push you in the right direction. So again, I just bring you back to, is your understanding and your view of the fear of God, is it big enough? Do you need it to get bigger? Do you need a bigger boat? Like these guys needed a bigger boat for what they were hunting. Do you need more of a revelation and a view of the fear of God? Think about it. And I didn't even get into the promises. There's so many promises in Scripture that come with the fear of God. It's a good thing, and we all need it, and it needs to be, Proverbs says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so, anyways, I hope you found that encouraging, maybe even challenging, and would love to hear your comments about it or anything. And have a great day. Have a great weekend.